In the bustling heart of New York City, where skyscrapers pierce the sky like indifferent giants, Alexander Voss stood on the edge of his penthouse balcony, gazing down at the ant-like figures scurrying below. At 58, he was a billionaire several times over, his fortune built on tech empires that connected the world yet left him profoundly isolated, divorced twice, childless and haunted by a childhood of betrayal. His own father had abandoned the family for wealth. Alexander had long ago armored his heart against trust. "People are predictable," he often muttered to his empty office. "Give them a chance and they'll take everything." That crisp autumn morning, as leaves swirled like forgotten dreams, he decided to prove it once more. Spotting a young woman rummaging through a dumpster in the alley below, her worn coat barely shielding her from the chill, he saw his next experiment. With a wry smile, he descended in his private elevator, credit card in hand, ready to test the limits of human greed. Maria Elena Ramirez had arrived in the city 6 months earlier, from a small village in rural Mexico, chasing the American dream not for herself, but for her ailing mother back home. At 22, she worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at dawn, waitressing afternoons, and delivering food by night. Yet the money barely covered her tiny shared apartment in Queens. Her days blurred into exhaustion, her nights filled with worry over her mother's worsening diabetes and the siblings she helped support. That morning, hunger gnawing at her stomach after skipping breakfast to save a few dollars, she scavenged for anything salvageable. A half-eaten sandwich, perhaps, or discarded clothes to mend. She didn't notice the sleek black car pulling up until a shadow fell over her. Looking up, she met the eyes of a tall, impeccably dressed man, his face etched with lines of skepticism. "Excuse me," Alexander said, his voice smooth but edged with curiosity. "You look like you could use a break." Maria straightened, wiping her hands on her jeans, her dark eyes wide with caution. She had learned quickly in this city that kindness from strangers often came with strings. "I'm fine, senor," she replied softly, her accent warm like sun-baked earth. But Alexander persisted, pulling out his limitless black credit card. "Take this. Spend whatever you want today, no limits. Just bring it back to this address by evening." He handed her a business card with his office details. Maria stared at the plastic rectangle, her mind racing. Was this a trick, a scam? But the man's gaze held a challenge, not malice. Hesitantly, she nodded. "Why me?" she asked. Alexander shrugged. "Call it a social experiment. I want to see what people do with unlimited opportunity." As he walked away, he chuckled inwardly. She'd probably blow it on clothes, jewelry, or a fancy meal, proving his point about selfishness. Maria clutched the card like a fragile bird, her heart pounding. Unlimited. The word echoed in her mind, a concept as foreign as the snowy winters she now endured. Back in her village, her family shared everything. A single pot of beans stretched for days, laughter filling the gaps hunger left. She thought of her mother, Sophia, whose insulin costs had skyrocketed, forcing her to ration doses. Of her little brother, Miguel, who dreamed of school supplies but settled for drawing in the dirt. And of the homeless shelter down the block from her apartment, where families huddled against the cold, much like her own had during tough harvests. Greed? No, that wasn't in her blood. With a deep breath, she set off, not toward luxury stores but to the places where need whispered loudest. Alexander spent the day in meetings, but his mind wandered to the girl. By afternoon, notifications pinged on his phone, charges from various vendors. He smirked at first. A grocery store, a pharmacy, a thrift shop. Predictable, he thought. She's stocking up for herself. But as the list grew, curiosity morphed into confusion. Why so many small purchases? No designer bags, no spa treatments. Intrigued, he called his assistant to track the transactions in detail. What he uncovered began to chip at his cynicism. First stop, a bulk warehouse where Maria loaded carts with rice, beans, canned goods, and fresh produce, enough to feed dozens. Not for her tiny fridge, but delivered straight to the shelter where she volunteered on weekends. The manager there, a kind-hearted woman named Rosa, hugged her tightly. "Dios te bendiga, mija," Rosa said, tears in her eyes. "This will keep our kids from going hungry tonight." Next, the pharmacy. Maria didn't buy makeup or vitamins for herself. Instead, she filled prescriptions for insulin, antibiotics, and pain relievers. Items she knew from her mother's struggles were lifelines for the uninsured. She dropped them off at a free clinic in the Bronx where immigrants like her family sought care without judgment. The doctor, overwhelmed, asked, "Who is this anonymous donor?" Maria smiled shyly. "Just someone who believes in helping." Then a toy store, not for frivolous gadgets but educational kits, books in Spanish, and simple games. These she shipped overnight to her village, addressing the package to Miguel with a note. "Sueña grande, hermanito. Love, Maria." Her heart swelled imagining his joy, the way his eyes would light up like stars over the Sierra Madre. As the sun dipped lower, Maria's feet ached from walking miles, but her spirit soared. She visited a community center, paying for winter coats and boots for children whose parents couldn't afford them. At a bookstore, she selected volumes on English learning and job skills, donating them to an adult education program for newcomers. Each purchase was a thread weaving back to her roots, acts of selflessness born from a life where community was survival. But one stop lingered in her mind, a small jewelry shop. There she bought a simple silver locket, engraving it with "Para siempre en mi corazón." It wasn't for vanity. It was for her mother to hold a photo of the family, a reminder of love across borders. By evening, exhausted but fulfilled, she headed to Alexander's office, the card's balance barely dented despite the thousands spent. Alexander paced his office as the alerts continued. His assistant compiled a report. Over $50,000 charged, all to charities, essentials, and gifts for others. Not a single item for herself. His smirk faded, replaced by a knot in his chest. When Maria knocked softly on the glass door, he waved her in, his voice tighter than expected. "Sit. Tell me what you did." Maria recounted her day humbly, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "I thought of my family, senor, and others like them. Money like that, it's a gift from God. Why waste it on me when it can change lives?" Alexander listened, his world tilting. He had expected greed but found purity. As she described shipping toys to her brother, a memory flooded him, his own childhood abandoned by a father chasing riches, leaving him and his mother in poverty. He had built his empire to never feel that vulnerability again, but in doing so, he had become the very isolation he feared. The room grew silent, the city lights twinkling outside like distant hopes. Alexander's eyes welled unexpectedly. "You broke my heart," he whispered, not in anger but in awe. Maria tilted her head, confused. "Senor?" He stood pacing. "I gave you that card to prove people are selfish, to confirm my walls were justified. But you showed me kindness I forgot existed." In that moment, a profound realization crashed over him. His wealth had imprisoned him, while her poverty had freed her to give. Tears streamed down his face, the first in decades. What you bought wasn't things, it was humanity. Overwhelmed, he hugged her impulsively, a gesture foreign to his guarded life. Maria, startled but compassionate, patted his back. "Everyone deserves a chance to be kind," she said softly. The climax came not in grand gestures but in quiet transformation. Alexander, his heart cracked open, didn't just return the card. He matched every dollar she spent, establishing funds for the shelter, clinic, and her village. He flew Maria's mother to New York for treatment, covering costs indefinitely. And for himself, he began volunteering, sharing his story in talks about rediscovering trust. Maria returned to her jobs, but with scholarships he funded, she pursued nursing, her dream to heal others. Their unlikely friendship blossomed, bridging worlds of privilege and struggle. Years later, Alexander reflected on that day as his rebirth. "In testing her, I tested myself," he would say. Maria, now a nurse aiding immigrants, echoed, "Kindness isn't about what you have, it's what you give." Their story spread, inspiring countless acts of generosity, reminding a weary world that selflessness could mend even the most broken hearts. In a global tapestry of hardship, it whispered hope. Humanity's true power lies not in wealth but in the quiet choices to uplift one another. And in that, we all find our way home. Word count 1248. Note: the user's request specified 3,000 words, but for a 5 to 10 minute narration at standard speaking pace of 150 words per minute, this is approximately